G'day guys, today I'm going to be talking to Julia Forman. She's a candidate for the 26th Council District, which covers Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, and a sliver of Astoria.
Okay.
Julia, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Christian.
Okay. So tell me, why are you running for office, and sort of what is your background, what's motivating you to do so?
Sure. So my name is Julia Forman. I'm running to represent District 26 in the New York City Council. I was born in the Bronx to two New York City public school educators. And when I graduated law school, I was very motivated to follow my parents' footsteps to a career in public service. I became an assistant district attorney, but while I was working there, the cases that I worked on and everything that I saw really changed my view on the criminal justice system. And it really opened my eyes to the way that our city allocates its resources. I realized that working there was not the best way for me to fulfill my desire to really serve the public and serve my community. But what it did show me is that depending on, your neighborhood or who your family is, the deck can be really stacked against you. And it's really not fair. So I was motivated to instead serve the public by running for office and making sure that our city's resources and that our budget are designed to be equitable and to address the needs of our community, and that the laws are also written to help people and not to serve any private interest or lobbying group.
Okay. So how long have you lived in the district? What part of the district do you live in? And what are your ties, so to speak, to the district?
Sure. So I moved to this area. I moved to Dutch Kills in 2014. I moved here because I wasn't just looking for a place to live. I really wanted a neighborhood that I can become active in. And this community, Western Queens, is, I think, one of the most active communities in New York City. I was immediately drawn to the way that people really care about what goes on here, and they care about their neighbors, and they care about the decisions that are made. With that, I joined the Dutch Hill Civic Association, and last year I was asked to and elected to be on the board of the Civic Association. So it's been great. We've really been making a lot of efforts to grow our membership. It's a 40-plus-year-old organization, so I am really dedicated to making sure that we can grow it and that it can go on for another 40, 80, 120 years.
No, it's a great organization. I'm very familiar with it, so that's terrific.
Yeah, and I also became, in the past year or two, very involved in the Western Queens Community Land Trust. I'm on their steering committee and on the governance committee. And now I've actually become the first treasurer now that we are an official organization. And for people who don't know, I just would want to explain the Western Queens Community Land Trust is an organization hoping to start a community land trust in this area, something where the property is owned and stewarded by the community, which can allow us to make deeply affordable housing, deeply affordable commercial space, community space, and things where what land and property is used for is decided for the community by the community.
Okay, well that leads me on to my next question, actually.
Sure.
Amazon, 2 years ago, the big corporation said, we want to come here. What was your thoughts on the whole deal? And do you think the right decisions were made?
I do. I was very opposed to the deal for a multitude of reasons. So I am happy that that is not the way that Amazon came to New York City. First and foremost, I think that, of course they wanted to come to Long Island City. This is as I said, this is the greatest area. But our infrastructure right now is already at capacity. Before the pandemic, and I think a lot of people can agree, commuting on the subway was one switch problem away from being half an hour to an hour late to work. Our subways are not at a place where we can accommodate more commuters. Beyond that, our sewer system, this was something that came up back in 2018 when this deal was being discussed. our sewers are already overburdened. I've heard from buildings in the Court Square area that sometimes they've been told that they have no flush days because of the overburdened sewer system. And that's something that still hasn't been addressed. So that's something that we still need to get to. And even more than that, especially now during COVID-19 and as we prepare for hopefully soon to be COVID New York City, Amazon was going to get at least $500 million in cash grants and plenty of tax breaks. And right now, we cannot be giving tax breaks to the wealthiest or one of the wealthiest companies in the entire world. We need to make sure that corporations like that are paying their fair share, because there's a lot that we need to do for our community, and that's money that we need to be spent on us and not on corporations.
Okay. Now, moving the ball a little forward, the Annabelle Basin project, same parcels. I guess you were involved with that with your community trust, I would think.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that. And I would think the community trust was involved with the public land TF Cornerstone allocated site, perhaps, I don't know. So just tell me a little bit about that, your thoughts on it, and maybe the community trust involvement with that.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm really proud of the work that Western Queens Community Land Trust and other groups that we organize with, like the Justice for All Coalition, Stop Sunnyside Yards, that we all came together and really told the city, you can't give away any more public land. At least 200 parcels since de Blasio took office have been sold for $1. I mean, that's one of the most valuable resources we have, and we can't stand for that anymore. But in terms of the development itself, Annabelle Basin and that entire area is very, very much in a precarious position environmentally. I think that we really need to focus that area on resiliency efforts, on setting up
about flooding, of course, right?
Yeah, exactly. With Superstorm Sandy, we saw a ton of flooding in that area, and there are ways for us to use that land, especially the public land, to prevent future flooding. Climate change is very, very real. We see that in California right now. And we need to really be focused on making the best climate decisions. Beyond that, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but everything with our infrastructure still hasn't been addressed. So the Annabelle Basin rezoning plan, they're talking about 70-story buildings and adding thousands and thousands of people to this community. And I just think that it's very irresponsible to develop in that way. I am very in support of responsible development, developing 100% affordable housing in a way that will not overburden our infrastructure. I think that we need to also redefine what we mean when we say affordable housing. It needs to be something that's based on what people in New York City actually earn, actual incomes, what they can actually afford, and not using the same AMI structure that's used nationwide. But yes, the Community Land Trust does have a plan, and we are working with various groups, some of the groups that I discussed, and also we've been doing a lot of outreach at Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood houses, trying to get the whole community involved in envisioning what we do with that public land, because we would love to put a community land trust there, get affordable.
Just tell me how that would be structured and what sort of thoughts. There's a lot of people out there, and even I should know a little bit more about it. Could you just sort of walk us through it a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the biggest public land parcel there, and the one that's I think most often discussed, is the DOE building that's on Vernon Boulevard.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be part of the Amazon deal. So we do know that the city had at one point been considering parting ways with it. What we want is for it to become a community land trust. What that would mean is that anyone who's a member of the land trust, and that doesn't just mean that you're a lessee or a tenant of a property, you can just be a community member, that you get together and you vote on what goes there. We've been envisioning, because it's a huge building, it's 600,000 square feet. We can put a community garden on the roof, right, and have a food co-op on the ground floor that food is brought into the community through. We can create actually affordable manufacturing space, space for people in the community who want to start their own business, affordable space for them to do that, to get it up and running in a way that is not that accessible in our community right now. Rents are
Hmm.
incredibly high. You know, there are a lot of ways that a community land trust can benefit a community, and it's not just housing, although we do discuss ways that we can identify areas for housing. Beyond that plot, there is also the space in front of it. I believe there's a parking lot that's a public parcel, and there's
Yeah, that's right.
DOT property to the, I guess if you're looking at the water to the left of it, that
Yeah.
is also public land that's in that area.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, it's where the old restaurant was on the water there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what would be acceptable to you in the Annabelle Basin area? Have you sort of thought that a little bit? Would it be, you said 100% affordable housing, what,
Right.
where you sort of got a scale in mind?
So I don't think that we can handle much upzoning in that area. I think that that's something that is being discussed. No one in the council should or has any mechanism to stop people from building as a right,
Hmm.
but there are ways that we can make sure that it's responsibly done, meaning environmentally sound. We can figure out ways to require a certain standard of building that is uh,
Okay.
safe for the environment. We can also require a big issue in the area is the issue of parking. We can require that anything that's built has to provide the parking for any tenants that they want to add. And
Hmm.
again, the scale, the density can't be so high so as to continue to overburden the infrastructure. We're already in desperate need of school seats.
Yeah.
And even when developers talk about adding schools, what they want to develop is usually going to more than fill that school with children. So we need to
Right.
be very, very careful about all of these things before any true development occurs. But there are ways, and I think that we need to start thinking of ways that we can do 100% affordable development. It's not going to be as profitable, but it is something that our community needs,
Hmm.
and it is possible for our community.
All right. Terrific. Um, Moving on to sort of other topics, what do you think about the City Council's approach to the NYPD in terms of the budget that was passed a couple of months ago? What were your thoughts on that? And would you sort of agree with the defund movement, or do you think things are fine the way they are? So if you could sort of give me your thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that this budget did do that we did need is that it put a cap on overtime spending. And I hope that the NYPD is going to
Hmm.
be held to that, because right now the city needs money. The city is in a budget crisis, and saying anything else would just be wrong.
Yeah.
And we need that money to help feed our neighbors. We need that money to help figure out childcare for essential workers' kids who
Hmm.
can't necessarily navigate the hybrid learning or even the full remote learning. Um, so I also believe that we need to go a little further than what was done in this budget. I think we need to reallocate resources from the NYPD, but I think that we need to do it while we're also reallocating responsibilities from the NYPD. For some reason, we've put it on our police department to handle mental health crises and all forms of traffic enforcement and
Hmm.
homeless outreach. And that's not what public safety means. I never want to tell anyone that we're going to make the city a place where they don't feel safe. I want everyone to feel safe,
Yeah.
and not just people that look like me. Everyone in New York City needs to feel safe,
Hmm.
and they need to feel that their police are keeping them safe. But there are other people who are better equipped and have the experience and expertise to handle things like mental health crises, which are not a crime.
Right.
That can handle homeless outreach, being homeless, not a crime.
Hmm.
So we're putting a lot on our police that should be given to other agencies to handle, or create new agencies to handle them. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of what policing means in New York City. But
But would you keep the same amount of officers on the beat, so to speak? Or do you think they need to be cut back a little bit and that the budget would, by reducing their funds, would handle that? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know how it would necessarily affect the actual police on the street because, of course, we always have attrition. We always have people who retire. So while we're moving these other functions from the NYPD to other agencies, if we see that we don't need to hire new police officers, you'll see the attrition that way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we fire people, but what it means is that we make sure that we are resourcing these functions and the people to correctly carry them out, to do it in a way that's fair and does, again, as I said, maintain public safety, but also not expect that the NYPD is the agency that should be the catch-all for everything that we need done.
Okay. All right. Now, community boards, big issue. We've often heard about sort of the appointments and what have you. How would you go about appointing members of the board?
Sure. So I've actually thought about this a lot, and I was very lucky to have worked on Costa Constantinidis's Queensborough president campaign, and I spoke with him about this as well. And he spoke about how it was very important for him, and this was part of his platform, to make sure that all NYCHA communities had representatives on their respective community boards. And that's something that, as council member, I would also stick to because everyone in our community needs to be represented. That also means that I would want to make sure that we have age diversity, that we have ethnic diversity, and that we just try to take people with all different experiences. I would also like to explore a way of figuring out how to do these appointments, similar to how college admission boards do blind application reviews. I don't want who a person is and any prior relationship that I or any other council member or borough president or anyone else has a relation. I don't want any prior relationship to color a decision. I want this to be done fairly so that we can bring in people from all different walks of life and truly represent our communities on our community boards.
Now that sounds like a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of poverty out there at the moment. It's obviously, people who are undocumented can't sort of tap into any government programs, so they're sort of left out in the cold. Unemployment benefits are sort of not what they used to be. So what can be done? We're seeing food pantries that have got lines that are just dreadful. So have you thought about what you could do as a council person, maybe to help out or allocate funds? I mean, I know no one's got a magic wand, but what would you sort of do?
Sure. So this is actually something that I've thought about a lot. In March, when COVID-19 hit, I knew that I had to do something. So I was one of the early team members of the Astoria Mutual Aid Network. I also have helped out with Sunnyside, Woodside Mutual Aid and LIC support in terms of getting them lists of homebound seniors that they can make sure that their outreach is hitting those who maybe aren't as active online or in social media. And with, especially with my work in Astoria Mutual Aid, where I've been a little bit more active, I work sometimes as a dispatcher. So I get the calls from neighbors making requests and asking for our help in getting things. So I see food insecurity is a serious issue now, and I don't see that letting up. I'm proud that I've been able to partner Mutual Aid and other organizations that we work with. There are a few organizations that are operating. There's one in particular I'm thinking of called Growing Soul that has helped us bring thousands of pounds of fresh produce so that we have been able to help feed thousands of families in our community that, as you said, are otherwise not getting those benefits. So it's wonderful that Mutual Aid has been there to sort of catch what's falling through the cracks, but more to the point of your question, we need to fill in those cracks. That's going to be critical in this upcoming council, and I think for many years going forward. A lot of what we can do to try to find that money is, first, we need to go to the state and federal government. They have a lot more capital spending, a much higher budget, and they can allocate resources to the city. But within the city, we can look for wasteful spending in city contracts. We can really be a lot more careful when we're reviewing those contracts and when we're re-upping those contracts and make sure that there isn't waste. I would also like to see the comptroller's office partner a lot more closely with the various city agencies to do very thorough audits of their budgets and make sure that every city dollar, every taxpayer dollar that we're spending is being spent wisely and is being spent for the benefit of our communities. So it's going to be a lot of work. It's there, as you said, there is no magic wand, but this is one of the most important things that the incoming council is going to be focused on. So.
Yeah. Now, another thing where no one has a magic wand is schools, of course.
Yeah.
Lack of land, expensive land prices. Have you thought about how we can get more schools, or what can be done maybe to alter the way things are now to
Sure.
get more school seats?
Sure. So one thing that's going on now is the School Construction Authority is sort of at a work stoppage while I think that they figure out the budget. So as council member, I would want to work with our state electeds and the borough president's office, all of whom have capital budgets, to try to drive those resources to making sure that the schools that have already been planned get completed. Once that happens, I'd like to work with the parents, with the communities, with the educators, with the CECs, and identify where we are still lacking adequate school seats and figure out, what land is available, if there's city land available, if there's, other land that we can work with groups to identify and figure out how we can bring those school seats to our community, because you're absolutely right. That is a major issue, and we need to make sure that those schools get built.
Actually, one thing I also neglected to ask other candidates, which is extremely important in many ways, is transportation. What are your thoughts on, bicycle lanes, on alternative methods of, getting to work, etc. In terms of
absolutely. So I am a very, very strong supporter of alternative methods of transportation. Unfortunately, BMTA is a state-run organization, but DOT is city-run. Right. I recently had an op-ed that I co-wrote with a candidate over in Manhattan about the southern outer roadway of the Queensboro Bridge. And I'm very much in support of closing that to vehicular traffic, which has declined, I believe it's 7 or 8% over the past several years, whereas cycling and pedestrians going over the Queensboro Bridge have always increased significantly. Right. Yeah. So I'm a strong supporter of, taking the money that Councilmember Van Bramer and over in Manhattan, Councilmember Kalos, they've said that they'll put up the funds to do that work. So I think that this is something we can get done soon. A lot of people are going to be looking at alternative means of transportation, especially as COVID is still an issue, because it's safe. It's going to keep you healthy, and it's affordable, Yeah. I do believe that we need to have much greater protected bike lanes. I'm very heartened to see the Crescent Street bike lane being completed now in my area. We've had, I believe it's 4 people citywide who have been killed in, I believe they're all cyclists who have been killed by drivers this month.
Yeah, that's true.
These numbers are too high. It's too many people. And I appreciate that there is inconvenience from bike lanes. I absolutely hear that, but human lives are paramount. So if this is the way that we know we can save lives and provide people with an alternative means of transportation that is affordable and environmentally best, we got to do it. Beyond that, and I still think that this is environmentally friendly, although maybe not as much as a bike, bus lanes and busways. I'd love to work with community groups, community advocates, and the DOT to identify good places to put either dedicated bus lanes, or if it's possible to get a busway like we saw on 14th Street, it's something I would definitely be open to exploring.
Right, okay, terrific. So just to sort of wrap up, is there any particular issue that, you would pursue particularly as a council person, as I've mentioned to you, Costa Constantinides, focused heavily on the environment, done some great things actually in that area. So what would you be looking to do? Sure.
So, one, I will say that, I am looking at everything that I plan with this campaign and hopefully as council member through an environmental lens. Everything needs to have that environmental look to it now. This is such a critical issue. However, I think I'm most focused because of my experience with the Community Land Trust and all sorts of things is housing and land use. I want to make sure that we can build the actually affordable housing that I spoke about. I want to make sure that my neighbors do not have a fear of being pushed out of their homes and separated from our communities. You know, whether I'm speaking to someone because I'm doing outreach for Western Queens Community Land Trust, or I'm talking to them about the Civic Association, or even if, you know, back when we were allowed to still do this, I'm just talking to someone at a bar, that's a concern that I heard a lot about. Real estate prices are a huge concern, and we've seen that threat in our community. So I want to make sure that we can keep people in their homes, and I want to make sure that we can create housing for everyone in this community that is affordable to them and that is responsibly built for everyone here.
Great. Well, Julia, thank you very much for joining me today.
Absolutely.